All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest ideas out there, sustainable development. Now, that might sound like a huge, abstract concept, right? Something born in a global conference. And it is. But the really cool part is how it all connects back to the very ground beneath our feet. So how does a worldwide strategy actually translate to the soil in our own communities? Let's find out.
You know, at its core, sustainable development really boils down to this one massive question. How do we make life better for ourselves right now, without completely draining the bank for future generations? It's a really delicate, high-stakes balancing act.
And here it is, probably the most famous answer to that question. Back in 1987, the UN's Brundtland Commission gave us this simple but powerful definition. This sentence became the North Star for a whole new way of thinking about progress, drawing a straight line between what we need today and what they'll need tomorrow.
Okay, so a definition is a great start, but it's not a plan, right? So how did this idea jump from a report into a full-blown global movement?
Well, things actually moved pretty quickly. The UN put the commission together in '83. Just 4 years later, the report Our Common Future was making headlines and putting sustainable development on the map. And by 1992, the momentum was so huge that it led to the legendary Earth Summit in Rio, where leaders from all over the world gathered to create a real action plan.
And that action plan got a name. It was huge, it was comprehensive, and it was built for the century ahead. They called it Agenda 21.
Think of Agenda 21 as the world's first shared to-do list for a better future. Now, what's really important here is that it wasn't a strict law or a binding treaty. It was more of a guide, a roadmap that 178 countries agreed to follow. And that 21 in the name, that was a direct shout-out to its goal, getting us ready for the challenges of the 21st century.
So to make this massive challenge manageable, Agenda 21 broke it down into 4 key areas. And this shows you that sustainability was never just about trees and pollution. The first pillar was all about people, tackling poverty, changing how we buy and use stuff. The second was about conservation, protecting our air, our ecosystems. The third was about empowerment, making sure everyone, women, young people, indigenous communities, had a seat at the table. And the fourth was basically the toolbox, how we're going to get it all done, using science, education, and technology.
Now here's the absolute game changer. Agenda 21 was never supposed to be some dusty document sitting in a drawer at the UN. No way. Its real power was its call for local action. The whole point was for every single city, every town, to create its own local Agenda 21. It was all about translating that giant global blueprint into real change, right on your own street.
And that's our cue to zoom in. Let's go from the global plan to a specific country and see why this kind of planning is so incredibly important. We're going to use India as our case study.
India is the perfect example of what we can call a resource puzzle. You've got some states with incredible mineral wealth, but not enough infrastructure. You have others with tons of water, but not the right industries. This kind of uneven distribution means you just can't have a one-size-fits-all plan. You need smart, balanced planning so that every single region gets a fair shot at sustainable development.
And to really get this, let's focus on just one resource, one that's absolutely vital: soil. And the scale here is just staggering. About 43% of India's entire landmass is covered by alluvial soil. That's the very foundation of the country's agriculture, its economy. So managing it well isn't just an environmental thing, it's a national priority.
So let's dig in, literally. Let's take a closer look at the incredible diversity of soils that make up this foundation. So while that alluvial soil is the biggest piece of the pie, India is home to a whole range of different soil types. You've got black soil, which is famous for growing cotton, covering about 15% of the land. Then there are red and yellow soils, which come from different kinds of rock, making up another 12%. Every single slice you see here represents a totally unique environment with its own set of challenges and opportunities. Let's put the two biggest players side by side. Alluvial soil, that's the gift of huge rivers like the Ganga. They deposit all this rich silt, which makes the land incredibly fertile for food crops like wheat and sugarcane. Black soil, on the other hand, is volcanic. It's made from weathered lava. Its texture is amazing at holding onto water, which is why it's perfect for a thirsty crop like cotton. Totally different origins, totally different strength.
And the variety just keeps going. Red and yellow soils get their color from iron locked inside ancient rocks. And then you have laterite soil. This one's a product of super rainy tropical climates where heavy rain actually washes away a lot of the nutrients. This leaves the soil acidic, but with the right management, it turns out to be perfect for growing things like tea and coffee.
So if soil is this vital, this diverse, and this fragile, how in the world do you protect it? Well, this is exactly where that big idea of sustainable development gets its hands dirty and becomes real practice.
First, you gotta know what you're up against. The big problem is something called land degradation, and it's mostly driven by us. Things like deforestation and letting animals overgraze strip away the protective plant cover. Mining can poison the land, and over-irrigating can make it too salty to grow anything. These are the main culprits we have to tackle. But hey, for every problem there's a solution, and these solutions are sustainable development in action. They aren't always fancy, high-tech gadgets. A lot of the time, they're just really smart, traditional farming techniques. Contour plowing, for instance, just means you plow along a slope's contour lines to slow water down and stop erosion. Strip cropping and shelter belts use plants and trees to fight wind erosion, and afforestation is the simple but incredibly powerful act of planting trees to heal the land. This is it. This is what it actually looks like to meet our own needs without wrecking the future.
In the end, it all comes back to a pretty simple philosophy, and Mahatma Gandhi just captured it perfectly here. Sustainable development, whether it's a giant global plan like Agenda 21 or a single farmer planting a row of trees, is all about getting one simple truth. The Earth gives us enough for everyone's need. The real question then is whether we can manage our greed to make sure it stays that way for everyone who comes after us.